Okay, councillors, can I have a motion, please, to resume standing orders, please? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, seconded by Councillor Tom Peters. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, as always, thank you very much for taking morning tea and welcome our new citizen and resident Drake, and seem like good people, so thank you very much. Councillors, we'll go back to our agenda, which we have in front, working off our hard copy, page 31. It's item COM 25/18, parking fine concessions. Can I have a move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Bob Rogan, thank you. I'll hand over to our Chief Corporate Officer to present this. No?
No, I can. We weren't going straight into the pool.
No, the pool's next. You're close.
Yep. Close? Very
Just
good.
cool your heels for a
I
minute.
need to reorder my thoughts.
Okay, good.
In terms of the
order,
report,
please.
There's an officer's recommendation that council reply to the minister that Tenterfield Shire Council will not be seeking to participate in the scheme and continue to apply the non-concessional parking fee to deter motorists from not complying with limits on parking. This report comes about based on a request from the Treasurer and Minister for Industrial Relations as to whether or not council wish to opt in to a discounted parking fee register and apply a discounted fee. There's been quite a lot of commentary from local government New South Wales on perhaps some of the reasons why the minister might be taking that action. So staff have written the report, also identifying the very small number of fees that are actually issued. It's not believed that it would be of great benefit to actually apply to reduce the fee.
Any questions to our Chief Corporate Officer to deal with the report? Councillor McNish, and I'll go to you, Councillor Bronwyn Petrie.
Like Kylie said, there's so few fines, it's hardly worthwhile even worrying about it. There should be a few more fines, actually, but there's not. When you look at places like Byron Bay, where the fines are actually in the millions every year, it's a major part of their
Revenue.
income, their revenue. Yep, and all those coastal places. Well, I'm happy to go along with his recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Just a comment before I go to you, Councillor Bronwyn. In the conversation with our briefing yesterday, Councillor McNish, I mentioned the same, and obviously it's coming from those bigger councils. It's a big revenue for them. And just to make clear with you, I've got 2 more payments to make on mine, and I'm clear. All right. Councillor Bronwyn.
See, we're a welcoming place for visitors, aren't we?
Yes.
I was just wanting an explanation on the sentence. By opting in, councils who charge all fees would reduce 52 fines, not just the original 10 announced. Just a bit more in, because I don't know.
On page 32, Councillor, on that third paragraph.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. And there's also on page 32, it says,
Yeah.
Sanford Shoal would only have 14 parking fines affected out of the initial 52 that have been announced to be reduced. Just can you explain those two?
So in the announcement, they talked about 10. Obviously, from an industry review of the document, it was found that they actually applied to more fees or fines. So the fines that are there for offences are quite numerous, and of those we only have signage that would relate to 14 that would be impacted. So we don't have, different clearway types of signage and all of those sort of things. So the ones that we do have is a stop park in a restricted parking area and park continuously for longer than permitted. For example, there's a fee for park without paying a metre fee. We don't have any parking metres, so we wouldn't issue that fine naturally because we've got nothing to base that fine on.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks for the question, councillors. Any more questions, comment to do with the report? Councillor Brian Murray, yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. On that note, I think we should be encouraging people more to park on the western side by planting more trees. Plant trees generally, not more trees.
In the car parks offered, councillor, yes.
To encourage people to park in there.
Yep.
And I think most of these breaches, which are minimal, are caused by people through due ignorance, really. It's nothing personal, I don't think.
And councillor, to help you with your comment, I fully support it. A bit more advertising that car parking's there. And
and shaded car parking above all else.
Yep. Councillor Bob Rogan.
Yeah, just a comment, Mr. Mayor. I
accept the comment.
I agree with Councillor McNish. I think there's room for more infringement notices. We've only had, 8 or something. There's one car in particular I know probably should have got all of those. So my question is just about the frequency of the inspections. Thank you.
No names mentioned, councillors. Any more questions to Kylie to do the report, councillors? You have another one, councillor? Question?
Well, just a comment. I just wanted to support what Councillor Murray said. We've raised that issue before a few times about trees in that western parking lot. But in addition to that, I had previously asked when we were doing the ramping up of the parking fines, there's no parking for that next block, which has got quite a few businesses, but other than on the street.
Which next block are you talking about, councillor?
From High Street
Back
north.
to Molesworth.
I don't know why this is echoing, but anyway.
Yeah, no, you're going. Go on.
Yeah, from High Street north. Like this block here's got parks each side of the road, but that next block doesn't. So with the streetscaping, there's reduced parking areas available. So whether there's some investigation council could have in the future as time permits as to where there might be some suitable parking land available for the future.
Noted. Councillor Murray, and just going back to that, I think it's probably something no way, because I do like to sit in on the Parks and Gardens, but with the trees and that, obviously that would sit with the Parks and Gardens. It needs to be driven through that. Yep. Okay, councillors, the report's there with the officer's recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, obviously, we move along. We've done the tabling of the document on page 35. So we'll deal with the addendum, and it sits because it's item COM 27/18. So we all got the addendum, councillors? It's item COM 27/18. It's the adoption of the Tenterfield War Memorial Bars Pool Management Plan. Can I have a move in a second to deal with the addendum item, please? Councillor Bob Rogan, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Don Forbes, thank you. And as always, I'll hand over to our Chief Corporate Officer, but good to have you in the room, Heidi, as our everything to do with this. It sits with what you do. What do you do? Okay, I'll try and be funny. But anyway, over to you, Col.
Okay, so yes, thank you very much for coming along, Heidi. And we also have Council's Risk Officer, Wes, here with us today as well, who has undertaken that risk assessment into some of the concerns that have been raised to members or by members of the public in terms of the application of our management plan. We did put a draft management plan up some time ago to guide, I guess, our changes in the pool, and now it seems prudent that we've actually been able to address some of that commentary to come back and have council adopt.
Can I just, and thank you, Wes, can you please come up and sit, and welcome, Wes, I apologise. Please come in. While I've done this, councillor, and with our Chief Corporate Officer, thank you for noting, Wes. Wes got everything to do with the with this report, and I think it's appropriate that if there is any questions, I have no problems in chairing the meeting of involving Wes or to work with our senior staff with any questions that are asked. Okay. Okay, so Kyle, I apologise.
No, you're right. So there's a recommendation there that council adopt the Tenterfield War Memorial Bars Pool Management Plan version 2.1 as attached.
Yep. Up here. Yeah. I'll just bear with Wes. Come in.
Technology.
Okay. So with the report, councillors, it's open for the council to adopt. Questions to Kylie or Heidi or Wes to deal with the report. Councillor McNish, yes.
Mayor, just between the lines there, is it still going well or is it problems there? I've heard a few negatives and not many positives about what's happening there. Sorry.
So from my perspective, on balance, I believe that things are going well. I think the management of the facility based on the risk assessment has been very positive and probably mitigated a lot of our risks that we'd identified previously. You'll also note in the monthly operational plan that we've recorded increased attendances, but I have put a little bit of a caveat on that about whether or not our recording was accurate previously. So it would appear that the numbers are lifting, but as I said, is that by the full amount that's being recorded? So I don't have a problem with how they're recording those particular numbers. And in terms of complaints, as always, the people who have problems are more vocal than perhaps those who don't. So we've had a lot of anecdotal public feedback as well, positive public feedback, as well as a couple of written submissions from people expressing public feedback, as well as feedback from patrons that aren't so happy about the operations, of which the risk assessment was designed to assess and try and evaluate those concerns and make sure that we had covered off on them.
So, Danielle Kelly's presentation this morning, that was just about jumping into the pool, was it?
Yep.
So you got to sit in your bum and then slide in. Is that what you have to do now, or walk down, or hop down the stairs? So,
I don't actually have the appropriate terminology. Can I pass that one over to you about how we enter the water?
Can I, before you do, Heidi, and I apologise, Councillor McNish, and fair question, and to do with the question or presentation from Danielle this morning, please be aware that this hasn't, we haven't gone down this road for something sexy to do. It's where we need to be. So, and that's why, like Wes is to do OH&S, and obviously his name's written all over the report. So I just need to note that while Wes is here, maybe be able to why we're going down this road. So just a bit of clarity. Okay. So the question was about diving, yes?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. The pool's run on a risk assessment every single moment that it's operational. So the lifeguards that are there are assessing the risk all the time, and it's about identifying those opportunities or those scenarios. So if the pool was really crowded and somebody jumped in, then they would be spoken to that it was unsafe and it wasn't in line with our risk assessment. However, I think if the pool was empty and somebody jumped in, they'd sort of perhaps be advised that we don't jump or dive in our swimming pool. However, we recognise it's safe to do so at this point in time. So it's all about putting the logic and the risk assessment into play at all given times. But the idea is, yes, to use the ladders, use the stairs to gently get into the water so that there's no risk to anybody who's in the water or under the water, and that everybody is safe.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks,
Yep.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, personally, as someone who grew up in the old swimming pool below the dam out there, where we used to hop out when a black snake turned up in the pool and people were treading on catfish and all sorts of things. And it just seems to me that a lot of the fun's being taken out of the OH&S might be killing the pool. So why don't you actually go there, just slide in and then just paddle around and hop out? And it's just a comment, Mr. Mayor. It just seems that
Noted.
the fun's been taken out of it.
Noted. Other questions to do a report? I'll go to you, Councillor Michael Petrie, and Councillor Brom, and then Councillor Very. Thank you.
I think you've got to have certain safeguards and everything else, but, people have been diving in the pool for bloody 50 years. But I think if you should be able to dive into a pool safely, like if you go up to the deep end there and you want to dive in and swim a couple of laps, but you should be able to dive in, not go in like a turtle over the side. I think that side of the thing wants looking at myself before we just get up and say, no diving, none of this, none of that.
Well, I think if you read into the report, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone that's here presenting, I mean, under supervision, being swimming club is something that's quite fine, isn't it? If you want to comment, Heidi?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So diving's permitted under instruction from someone who understands how to coach people on diving and the correct ways in which to do it. And I think it just needs to bear in mind that all of the risk assessment and the risk management of the pool is in line with the Council's risk management framework, and it's also in line with the industry guidelines, which is the Guidelines for Safe Pool Operations, which are published by Royal Lifesaving, and it's a national guideline for the running of pools and the safety of pools.
And Heidi, it's a very good point, and we should be aware of that, and I thank you. Councillor Brom and Petrie.
Well, so therefore the kids who go through swim school are trained how to dive. Once they're too old to be in swim school, they can no longer dive into the pool, correct? Because they won't be under supervision anymore. And same as those of us who've either been treading on catfish or whatever, who've been diving for the past 40-something years, can't even dive anymore up the deep end according to this, if that is what recreational diving is. So is recreational diving standing start diving?
So recreational diving is diving at any time where it's not in a competition mode.
Right, okay, thank you. So to continue, I object strongly that you cannot, you will, if this goes ahead, you'll be prohibited from doing a standing start dive from the halfway mark to the deep end. I think we are a nanny state. I think it's quite appalling. I do understand risk. I was in a pool as a kid when I was 12 and a kid did die in Charleville Pool when people were jumping off the 10-foot board. And which is why every time I swim, I just scan the bottom of the pool the whole time. Doesn't matter if there's no one else even in the pool. But so you were saying that unless you belong to a swimming club, you can't dive. So therefore, once you get too old for swimming club, you're trained to do it. But no, suddenly you're not capable of doing it. Those of us who have been diving for a long time, quite satisfactory, and from the shallow end, because that's where we used to always do the relays, everything else, can't even do it as adults from the halfway point up if this goes ahead. The other drama, so that's the diving part. The other problem, I have no problem with bombing, etc., etc. I am very concerned about the unstructured swimming lesson, and thank you, Wes and Heidi, for changing number 5, that it's an allocated space or a lane booking rather than having to book an entire lane and take up a whole pool just to have one little kid down the shallow end. I'm very concerned about number 3, which is the definition of illegal guarding, because I believe illegal guarding is it is a legal term. But my big issue is number 2. Lessons training should only be by an adult 18 years of age or more. So that means if this were to go ahead, there are some parents of children in our town who are under the age of 18. That means that they would not be able to enter the water at the shallow end with their little children and do water familiarisation. If you look in the introductory paragraph, which is an unstructured swimming lesson / water familiarisation. So you can't.
What page?
Page 4 in the document.
So this is in, councillor, so we all know, this is in the actual,
This is in the addendum.
the pool management plan.
No.
No,
Yeah,
well,
but
what
in
page
there,
of this are you related to?
on page 4 of
Right.
the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah. So-
Right. Move way ahead, but
Yeah,
anyway, keep
okay.
going.
So page 4, under unstructured swimming lesson, water familiarisation. Number 2, lessons training should only be by an adult 18 years of age or more. Well, given that it's actually legal to have sex at 16, and some of those kids have kids under 18, so they're there with their child, cannot now, if this goes ahead, enter the shallow end of the pool and do water familiarisation with their babies, if this were to go ahead, because they are under 18. They are the legal guardian, but they are under 18. They can drive a car, but it's too risky for them to take their own child into the shallow pool or be a 17-year-old with a younger sibling under the age of, also cannot do water familiarisation with their own siblings at the age of 17. I think it should stay at the age of 16 that it is currently. So that's my 2 concerns, is the changing it from 16 up to 18 and eliminating standing start diving. I don't mind eliminating diving other than standing start from the halfway point to the deep point.
Heidi, you have some comment there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to the age and the possibility that parents might be younger than the age of 18, the pool management plan is a guideline to help endorse the risk assessment and the way that the operators manage the pool. So they're not going to ask a parent who's under 18 not to teach their child how to swim. It's not a rule or a piece of legislation. It's a guideline, and it's for interpretation to be used in the safest method and manner.
Wes, did you have some comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I just Yeah, just to reiterate what Heidi was just suggesting there. Sorry to go back to the start again, but the basic premise of this, and which is endorsed by the new Guidelines for Safe Pool Operation 2018. Prior to that guideline, if we take the legislative components out of the picture, that guideline alone is the crucial document for councils and public swimming pools and private swimming pools alone as well. The driving factor behind that prior to 2018, there were very specific items in those guidelines that would deem you can dive in a pool if it's deeper than 1.8. You can or you can't, you can or you can't through that document. The 2018 document has changed dramatically. No longer are there those specifics within those guidelines. There is a complete document now that heads a complement of 14 documents that is risk management. And that risk management expectations around that document are very similar, if not nearly identical, to the workplace health and safety legislation. We cross two realms within the pool. We do have a duty of care and obligations under the Work Health and Safety Act and legislation with the pool contractor and any staff or contractors they may have down there. We also have our risk management elements, which are outside of the work health and safety, and then we have the guidelines and government requirements for the operation of a pool. The risk management framework that they've implemented is what I assessed to make sure that it was in line with council's framework as well, of which it is, and I'm extraordinarily happy with what the contractors implemented down there successfully at the moment. The outcome from that framework, based on the pool contractor identifying all hazards, the guidelines, be it the guidelines for safe pool operation and the Work Health and Safety Act, says our duty of care as the council and the contractor, we must identify all hazards down there. Regardless if they come to fruition or not, that is then determined in the risk assessment. So if we just isolate diving by itself, I can sort of sit here and go, well, I agree that diving should be allowed and in isolation it looks okay. But what we must do, and the pool contractor must do, is look at our particular environment. The size of the pool, the depth of the pool, the number of and demographics of people in the pool, and that risk assessment was done also allocating the number of staff they might have supervising. So Heidi had touched on that it is something, it is sort of dynamic, it can change, that the contractor will make their own decision, and it's forever going. It's not like once this risk assessment and this framework is in place, it's set in concrete.
It's a living document.
It's something that must be continually reviewed based on the hazards and risks associated at this point in time at the pool. So if we've got 50 school children at the pool, obviously what we may have in those initial risk assessments might change. The controls might be higher. We've got no one in the pool and a couple of grandmothers, then that risk assessment might come down. But we have to have a starting baseline for that premise to be introduced into the pool, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's very relevant.
The other point with that too is that the risk assessment has been undertaken in conjunction with the providers who ultimately bear the risk and who were responsible for their level of risk. And there was a question this morning that was also raised, not to answer one from the public, was, are we adequately insured? Yes, we are, like everybody else, but they are also requirements that we embed within our management practices.
Councillors, we'll go back. We've got Councillor Very, Councillor Peters, Councillor Forbes and Councillor Reagan. So just giving you a heads up. Councillor Very.
Thank you. With the diving, when I was in my version of Pentridge, we had the pool open to the kids on everybody open the weekends, and during the weekends, mostly we kept to our own part of the pool type thing, the kids at college, and we had people there practicing diving from the high diving board, the low diving board and the starting blocks virtually all the time. And if it got too crowded, I think common sense may have died, I don't know, but we never had a problem with people practicing. Even the young kids would keep out of that area. I don't know if common sense is lacking in Tenterfield or we've got to allow for it not to happen. But with the practicing diving, say you've got a pool there and it's got 20 people in it and they're not near the deep end, or where these people want to practice diving. I'm talking practice. I'm not talking structured lessons or anything like that. I'm just talking about people just want to practice, or starting, whatever you want to call it, off the starting blocks. Would the pool managers allow that type of thing to happen, or would they simply put a total blanket on it?
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Very. That's exactly the premise I was sort of trying to convey, is But what should happen is that person or individuals that were deciding they were going to do that need to involve the contractor, the pool contractor, to say, listen, this is what our intent is this morning. So the pool contractor can say, actually, I've got an additional lifeguard on, the school children aren't coming in till 12 o'clock. I'll identify an area, an allocation of section of the pool to allow you to do that. We've got an hour before the school kids come in. I'll monitor it. They'll make an assessment then, like I said, to either increase the level or decrease that level of control based on their involvement in it. Again, it's a risk assessment. So as much as I don't want to say it, common sense is out the window, unfortunately. We just have to allow the involvement of all stakeholders to say, yes, I'm happy. I'm the one that's responsible for the pool. I'm going to allow you to do that for the next half hour in this particular section, and I'll keep an eye on you.
Yep.
So in short answer is yes to that.
Thank you, Wes, for your response. And to be supportive of what Wes just said, and your questions, Councillor, look, common sense is a delicate flower that doesn't grow everywhere. And it's the world we live in today. That's right. But we need to be aware that you know, all very similar age, but I mean, what we dealt with, how we grew up, it's sadly not the world we're living in today. And at any stage where council is liable because of something that they haven't done, that's what we need to be supportive of with this document. Councillor Peters.
I think my questions have nearly been answered. There's only one that I'm a bit worried about. The pool contractor, he'll have to interview every child that goes through the gate and say, okay, you can't dive. You must put your bottom over the edge of the pool and slide in. You cannot dive. Am I right in saying that? Half the fun of a child is diving into the pool. Like I remember when I was a kid, we used to dive everywhere. And anyone that dives always puts their hands in front of them, so we're going to smack into the bottom and they can pull themselves up. They don't usually go in there to kill themselves.
Councillor, I'm more concerned that they can have sex legally at 16. Still haven't got over that yet. When did that come in? Do you want to reply, Heidi?
Not about that, Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. CE.
What was the question? We will have conditions of entry at the pool entry, so everybody can be made aware of what the requirements are. And the pool operators actually greet and talk to people as they come in. They get to know people. So they do develop relationships and make sure everybody understands their roles and responsibilities within the facility. So,
thank you for your reply, Heidi. Councillor Forbes.
Yes.
Councillor, yeah.
How many kids or children can one single parent supervise, is allowed to supervise?
Good question.
it depends on the age of the child.
Well, let's say under 5.
So under 5, I think it's 2. I'd need to check the guidelines, and then I think it's either 2 or 3. I think it's, I'd have to check to confirm, but it's 2 or 3, and then as they get older, it's more. It's up to 4.
Because down at the bottom of page 4, you've got children under 5 years must be accompanied. And the reason I bring this to your attention is that last Sunday I had somebody come to me and say that they know of one particular parent who had 2 children there, was asked to leave because she couldn't adequately supervise 2 children under 5. So I just bit worried about that. So,
I can't comment on the individual circumstance because I haven't seen it, but they would have done a risk assessment on how the parent was behaving, how the children were behaving, what the dangers in the environment were, and whether it was deemed risk to the child or to anybody else, and would have made their decision based on that. And I would have expected that they would have had some sort of conversation with the patron to explain their concerns and to see if they were going to modify the behaviour in any ways. But we could ask further questions in relation to that particular incident.
Councillor Rogan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. Most of them have been covered, I think, but I actually have some acquaintances in the pool management game for the last 30, 35 years or something, and I got an email from them yesterday after I posed some of the questions that I come up with after reading the management plan, and basically they quote the Royal Life Saving Society as the I guess, the expert body where most of the documents are based from. In regards to diving, we had a conversation about that, and a lot of it's up to the pool contractor, but I'll just read the bottom sentence that she sent me, and it says, many pools have policies that only allow diving under the Learn to Swim program and under a qualified instructor. Hope that helps. So, but the conversation leading up to that was saying that not every pool is banned diving, but just about every pool pretty much has banned it from the blocks because they're for competition, they're starting blocks, they're nothing else. And most pools do have cones on those unless there's a competition. And not every pool is banned diving a standing dive like Daniel was talking about into the deep, but many have. So I just wanted to put that out there for information to people to digest. And I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor, that we've got a management plan that we've been asked to, I can't really see anything wrong with that management plan. I don't see why we shouldn't adopt it. Wes has already explained that it can be a fluid thing, like that can be...
Like a living document.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with that. I mean, and like Gary and a few other people have said, we can't look back. We live in a world today that's not like it used to be.
That's right, sadly.
And I know from businesses I was involved in, the biggest concern you got is, am I going to get sued? Do I have insurance for this? So we live in a world of risk assessment, unfortunately. So we hired a contractor who we've agreed by doing that is the expert in the field, and I don't think it's up to us to second guess what the contractor recommends. So that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor. Councillor, well, in fairness, Councillor Bronwyn, I will go to Councillor Murray because this will be your second go. So I'll go to you, Councillor Murray. I'll come to you, Councillor Bronwyn Petrie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that'll save you turning your head. When you're dealing with
Thank you for your concern, Councillor. But anyway, you got the floor.
My question is, and this is referring to Councillor McNeish's question earlier on, how are things going in the swimming pool? At the workshop I was at last Wednesday or Thursday here,
yes,
someone said that the numbers have doubled.
Yep,
is that correct?
That's been.
Then I noticed somewhere here that it says up.
Yep.
Now, the question I'm asking is 50% on what? What are the figures?
That should be 100%. They have doubled.
Yeah, but I'm asking on
last year's number for the months.
It will relate to that time of the year, I would say, Councillor.
Right.
Yes.
That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bronwyn, I'll go to you. Is it a question to do with the report, Councillor? Yes. And then I'll close debate. Councillors, or questions?
Thanks. Just in response to some answers from Wes and Heidi.
Yep.
And we're saying that the contractor can make a decision if the pool isn't. No, they can't, because if you look at page 31 of the actual document thingy, 9.4 says recreational diving, bomb diving and flipping activities are not, it should be, are not to be permitted or are not permitted. There's a typo there, which I'd like fixed. Recreational diving, bomb diving, flipping pool activities are not be permitted, which is not correct English. So, so it's not permitted. So if the pool contractor said there's hardly any people in the pool, you can go up there and practice your diving, or you can dive in and do your laps or whatever, they would be in breach of this. And if something did go wrong, the first thing people would say, well, why did you allow that to happen when the memorandum, the pool document says will not be permitted? There's no fluid anything here. There's no discretion available in this document. If it said bomb diving and flipping pool activities are not permitted, standing start diving permitted at the discretion of the pool contractor on or eliminated during peak occupancy, or words to that effect. Fair enough. This allows no variation.
Councillor, just for clarity, so you're on page 31 under 9.4, the first sentence under diving.
Yes, nowhere there does it allow any discretion, or it should say are not permitted. Well, it should say bomb diving and flipping pool activities are not permitted. Recreational standing start diving is permitted at the discretion of the contractor depending on occupancy.
I'll just stop you there, councillor. In fairness, I think there needs to be some comment from either Wes or Heidi on that one.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm actually in agreement with that. I think a modification to be made along those lines. I would just like to add to that it would be endorsed with a risk assessment that followed through with it. So, absolutely.
Also, if you wanted to make it from the halfway point to the deep end, something like that, have the parameters around that, so that you don't have people diving in at the shallow end.
Yep.
The other thing I queried down under competition diving, it says competition block diving starts and not permitted in the shallow end of any pool. We know that you can't do block diving, but does that mean you can actually in competition do a standing dive from the shallow end? Like we used? Yeah, well, it just says competition block diving at the shallow end. It should be just competition diving, shouldn't it?
That should be. There's no diving allowed from the shallow end, full stop.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't have the words block diving. It should just be competition diving and remove the word block. That's it halfway down the page.
Yep.
The other question that wasn't quite answered was so the should only be by an adult of 18 years of age or more. Is that indicative or is that mandatory?
Just put that in context.
Lessons
Councillor.
training, so unstructured swimming lessons should only be by an adult 18 years of age. Heidi did say, well, the contractor can see whether the parent's coping or not and da-da-da-da-da.
That's exactly right. And that's, again, allowing that fluidity of that decision to be made at the time based on the contractor's decision with that current environment that they're faced with.
But would the man on the street understand that that says should be only that? Because I still have the issue. I mean, when I was 13, I was teaching my sister who was 5 how to swim. And I was 13. That means I would have had to wait another 5 years, because she's my sister, not my daughter, to be able to go and do that, which stage she would have been 10 and probably drowned. I mean, my concern is that you're going to have family groups unable to go to the pool with their siblings and get those younger kids used to the water, etc., unless they go and have paid lessons. I have a concern with that. I still have a concern as the opening time, and I'm glad you've still left in there Tuesday and nights, but I'm a bit concerned about the comment this morning. Had a person speak to say that she herself had been there after 6, and yet we have been told as council that no one, 0 patrons have visited the pool after 5:30 p.m. Yet we had an instance, we had 3 families named who have been there after 6. So that is of concern to me. And that is the case, then I'd like to know why we've been told no one after 5:30. And in that case, then those opening hours should perhaps remain. It's on page 5 of the original, at the start of the document, up the top.
Yeah.
That hasn't been.
Right, yeah, of course, can I?
Thank you. Those numbers are based on this season. It's not last season, so it's just been this season. There's been no patrons after 5:30 this season.
Okay.
But that's not what Danielle said.
Danielle's reference was to last December, last year.
Right. Okay. We'll close questions, councillors. We need to move on. So thank you, Wes. Thank you, Heidi, and obviously Kylie and those. Councillor Bronwyn for just noting those couple of amendments or few changes in that. So we will move on. Right, councillors. The officer's recommendations there. All in favour of the. Okay, so we need to make a change. The council adopt the Tenterfield War Memorial Bars Pool Management Plan version 2.1 as amended. Happy to make that change? Okay.
If you make that change, can you just highlight it in the motion? So if you have it as attached, we would have taken those administrative.
Yep, fair enough. Well, why do we move it as an amendment? It's done then. Happy? Someone like to move along those lines? Councillor Bronwyn, thank you. Second to Councillor Varian, I thank you. Okay, Councillor Bronwyn.
Well, the amendment could be at 9.4 of the pool management plan. So at 9.4 amended to bomb diving and flipping pool activities are not permitted, full stop. Recreational standing start diving is permitted at the discretion, is permitted between the halfway
Slow down, councillor.
Sorry, what's after recreational diving is permitted?
Recreational diving is permitted. Standing start diving, sorry, recreational standing start diving. Is permitted between the halfway mark and the deep end.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, of course you can, Heidi. Just pull up.
It's permitted in water deeper than 1.8.
Yep.
With the blocks, don't you just cut the blocks all in one end?
There's blocks on both, the blocks are going to be,
Okay.
Deeper than 1.8 metres?
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor. I'm in total agreement with this. I just wanted to highlight just a technical aspect that I wasn't even aware of down at the pool. Though the 1.8 is used to be an old guideline, which is I'm quite happy with that it's deeper than that. I got a shock when I stuck a tape measure in up at the deep end, how slowly that actually does taper down to 3 metres. So if you're standing at the deep end on the side and put a tape measure down, it is only still 1.8 metres, close to the actual side of the wall.
Yep.
The full 3 metres is
sort of
only a small
rendered in,
section
yeah.
of about 2.5 metres wide by about 3 metres long is the actual 3 metre section. Yes, it is, yes. Yep. Yep.
So take out in between the halfway.
Yes, that's fine. Yep.
So it's just, pick them up at the discretion
I was down there the other day. Actually, I'd lost something.
of the pool
I found it too.
contractor. Is that just full stop or do we go depending on occupancy?
I think the occupants, I think it needs to be at the discretion based on a risk assessment at the time, because there could be other factors other than the occupancy that might be eliminating of it.
No, just leave it at that.
Right.
You happy with that?
Yep. And then to take block out of competition diving.
So what number is that?
Well, it's under 9.4.
Competition diving. The competition diving starts are not permitted in the shallow end of the, let's remove the word block.
Yep. Yep. That's wet. No. We're taking block out.
Competition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, okay.
To remove the word block.
No competition diving.
Yeah.
Put that in there. Yep, okay.
Okay.
Second paragraph. Let's remove
Yeah,
the word block in second paragraph.
Yep. Okay. Righto. Councillor, get back to the meeting procedure. Councillor Petrie, being the mover of the, Bronwyn Petrie, the mover of the amendment, did you want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Gary Very, being the second, did you want to speak to the amendment? Okay. Councillors, with the adoption of the amendment, then we'll be adopting the War Memorial Bars Management Plan version 2.1 as amended, and these are the amendments. All in favour of the amendment? Against? Carried. Now we adopt the whole thing. All in favour? Against? Carried. Beautiful. Move on. Okay. Councillors, we'll move on to page 53 in your hard copy. It's item EC027/18. It's to do with the, sorry. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Wes. Thank you very much. It's to do with the Mount Lindsay Road $24 million project, Tenterville Shire Council Roads and Maritime Services Project Delivery Memorandum of Understanding. Can I have a move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Murray, and I thank you. And I hand over to our Chief Operating Officer to present this report. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. You're all aware of the $24 million Mount Lindsay project that has been going now for a good 6 months or more. You're also aware that this project is jointly funded as between the state government and the federal government, each contributing $12 million. Council is effectively the project manager for this project, but it is working very closely with the Roads and Maritime Services to deliver the project within the budgetary constraints. And in line with that, it was decided that we needed to have an agreement as between RMS and council as to how we would operate as a project control group and how we would deliver this project and work together. So what we've arrived at is a draft memorandum of understanding. That is before you as that's in booklet 1, attachment 1. I see no reason why we shouldn't be signing that as is, albeit that at the present time it's in track change. So you can see that there's been a few toings and froings to sort of get the wording right and get the intent right. So I would commend to you the recommendation as is, but am open to questions.
Thank you, Andre. Any questions to Andre to do with the report, councillors? No? Okay, councillors, the officer's recommendation is there to endorse. All in favour? Against? Carried. So we've done that one. What's this? Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, councillors. We'll move on to page 82 in your hard copy. It's item ENV 27/18 to do with rubbish recycling, refers to notice of motion. Resolution 48/18. Can I ask for a move and a seconder here, please? Councillor Verry, I thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Michael Petrie, thank you. And we'll hand over to Chief Operating Officer to present the report. And good to see you here, Gillian, too, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, once again, look, this report dates, well, basically addresses a notice of motion brought by Councillor Verry back in March. Councillor requested that Council bring a report on the most up-to-date management waste systems, so that that could certainly be part of what informs Council going forward with any sort of changes to a strategic business plan or its practices. Gillian, my colleague next to us, the Manager for Waste Services, Water and Waste Services, has done quite a bit of work in this space. It's quite a comprehensive report, as you'll see, quite a measure of background, on not only the subject matter, but also the region of Tenterfield. So we've asked Gillian to come here today to specifically answer any questions that you may have, and I would commend the report as is to you.
Any questions to Andre or Gillian to do with the report, councillors? Councillor Verry.
I've got two, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll allow two, thank you.
Gillian, I suppose I addressed you to you or Andre, whoever. With the report, I can't see any education component in there to educate the people of actually what can be recycled and how we can go about that. And the other question is glass. Now, I know we're being flooded with glass. Surely there must be a cheap way to crush glass and use it as road base or whatever. Yeah, I can think of a million ways myself to do it.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, councillor. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yep. Unfortunately, the market for glasses is basically down to $10 a tonne. Yes, there are different ways to process glass. The machine down at Lismore that they currently have is broken because you do need quite large grinders to grind the glass down enough so that you can use it for other purposes, because otherwise you end up with sharp pieces, as you'd know. So we're basically, they turn it back to sand, and so then they can use it for other purposes, like in roads or for bedding pipe material and stuff like that. We'd have to probably purchase a similar thing if we wanted to make sure the glass was properly prepared, and the machines are quite expensive. So I think we'd be looking at a grant of some kind to get those.
The other question, councillor, was to do with education, to do with recycling.
Sorry about that.
Well, correct, councillor? Yeah.
We do have a separate budget for education so that we can communicate to schools and get people on board with recycling. So we do have a separate budget for that. So that wasn't included in this report because it was more about waste and how it's dealt with and the risks and what our systems actually are.
Yep. You have another question?
Is that okay?
Comment on those two answers.
Righto, I'll allow that. We'll move on.
With the glass, Heidi, I've seen
Gillian.
I don't know. I just lost you. You're sitting there. That's all. Yeah, Gillian. The recycling glass. I seen a machine that actually was just in a tumbler, giant tumbler, like a cement mixture, and they just put it in there and they actually used it in walls of a building. They used the coloured glass for that one, and it just rendered up nicely. But there was no sharp edges left once it went through the tumbler. So it was just a giant cement mix, and I just thought that was a cheap way of getting rid of bottles for us. You know, $10 a tonne is cheaper than buying sand. And the other thing with the education component was more about using to educate the people what they can recycle, not so much the school kids. I think they're onto it. I think it's the adults I'm worried about.
Any other questions to Gillian or Andre to deal with the report? Councillor Bronwyn.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Gillian, I was just wondering, when we've got the glass issue, are any of the bottles that are pulled out, do any of them go off to the hole in the wall, you know, where you get your little voucher, or not, or are they all just sent to Lismore Recycling? And also, what type of opportunity do you see in obtaining income through green waste, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Like, what projected income do you envisage if we would go down that way?
Thank you for your comments. I can address the comments first about the education campaign. Yes, we understand that we need to do a lot more with older people, and those campaigns are coming out shortly because of the change in what Lismore is actually going to take. So I've already commenced some advertisements for the newsletter that we put out. And additionally, with the glass, the major issue is that nobody wants it. A lot of councils are actually having problems getting rid of the glass itself because it's not worth very much money and to move it around is quite expensive. So that's more of the issue. We could deal with it on site, like you suggest, but we'd have to look into processes for that, for sure, and a market, because that's the biggest problem, is the market and the cost to make it. Yep. For sure. And so moving on to your comments, a lot of councils are actually having problems with bin diving because the 10-cent hole in the wall thing is quite popular. And so we've had a few of that people going around through our recycling bin. So I can't say wholeheartedly that it isn't happening, because it could be happening with the glass bottles, that people are taking them out of recycling before they actually get to us. And I'm sorry, I missed you.
But do council staff do it before you send glass off to Lismore? Any that could go into
the recycling thing? Some of them can get them when they're whole, and there's an agreement in place that if they do that, then they have to pay for the cost of the bottles as in the tonnage rate. Does that answer your question?
There was two questions there, Councillor.
I forgot the... Oh, the green waste. I think our green waste would be worth quite a lot of money. If you go to Bunnings and a lot of their websites, they do have their prices per tonne there, and we'd be putting our green waste into the same sort of field per tonne of waste. I don't have that information here exactly on the exact prices per tonne, but I can get them for you. Yeah, they're very successful. I've had a lot of requests for our green waste and our decomposed mulch as well, but I can't do anything with it until we process it in some way so that then we can be assured of no green seed, like waste seeds that contaminate. Yep. So we can't actually do anything until we can process it correctly. Yep. But there's a market already. People have been asking.
Julian, that's a really good point you're raising. It's a challenge for the council to be supportive of that. So thank you for raising that. Other questions? I need to move on. Councillor Peters, question to the report? I'll accept a comment.
Yes, just a comment. We went through this before. Remember they spent $56,000 mulching green waste, the rubbish dump, and we couldn't get rid of it. It was just a waste of $56,000, if I remember correctly.
Well, I'd hope we move on from there, Councillor, because Gillian's obviously has commented to the meeting that there is a demand there, so it's something we need to take note of and be supportive. Any other questions? Comments to report? Councillor Murray, question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I ask, through you, Mr Mayor, that the GM or the CEO, I beg your pardon, would comment on the glass because
Yep.
they've been heavily opposing waste to energy, I believe. That was information I brought back from Sydney.
Oh.
So would you like to comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I started recycling glass in 2007 at the town of Port Hedland by putting it in a shallow receptacle and crushing it with a 11.5 tonne smooth drum roller and using it as fines for the path that ran between the town of Port Hedland, Wedgefield and South Hedland, which I understand after meeting a couple of people at the national conference is now finished. Bathurst City Council used glass in their specification for the Mount Panorama racing circuit resurfacing in 1993, which took 3.5 seconds off a lap because the cars were able to get more grip. Go-kart circuits have been using glass in asphalt for even longer than that, which is where the engineer Neil Allen got the idea from. Councillor Very mentioned glass rendered walls, which when the sun shines on them look absolutely spectacular. And the other thing is they don't need painting. At $10 a tonne, it's difficult to repurpose the glass outside of a local area because of the cost of cartage. That kills us. The waste to energy, depending on what system you use, the glass that actually goes through some machines entraps the nasty pollution in little glass balls forever and a day and makes the pollution benign. The idea of using it for in lieu of sand for non-structural applications like pipe bedding and things like that is quite good. Last month, Council adopted a Merrill Minute in relation to the container deposit scheme and what we're doing with Lismore and having yet another fresh look. I've spoken to the Chief Operating Officer at length about this, and I actually mentioned to the Mayor yesterday that in a month's time the game would have changed yet again, and in 2 months it would have changed again. It's a moving feast. It changes every 5 minutes because as soon as something's worth nothing and it gets down to a certain price, someone else goes, oh, well, that's cheap. We can use it there, and then the price goes up again. So as I mentioned, well, Council's adopted it, that Council has a review of what we can do ourselves. There's 2 attachments and a report from with the latest up-to-date information in this month's business paper. But again, that could change in 3 or 6 months' time because the industry is changing that fast. There's a lot of pressure from David O'Loughlin, who's the national president of ALGA, as late as last Friday, trying to coerce the federal government into spending some of the $1 billion that's raised in the states and actually fixing the issue. I put it to our president, Linda Scott, that and she agrees because the local government New South Wales has got a campaign at the moment, Save Our Recycling. If the New South Wales government had spent $4.5 billion, which has been collected in the last year on the problem, we wouldn't have a problem. But that's how much money they've collected. Enormous amount of money. We get 18% of it back. If we got 100% of it back, we would not have a recycling problem. We would not have a waste problem. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, councillors, the report's there in front of you. Excuse me. All in favour to receive and note the report? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, move on to page 86. Item ENV 28/18, waste baler infrastructure. Can I have a move in a second here, please? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Gary Very, and I thank you. And I hand over to our Chief Operating Officer to present this report.
Mr Mayor and councillors, you would be aware that each year when you adopt the operational plan, you adopt a series of CapEx provisions going forward for the following 12 months. Within that following 12 months, there'll be times when things need to change, and this is one of those times. what is right and proper if we're going to change the CapEx and perhaps reallocate some monies or change the budget is to bring a report back to yourselves, identifying with you where we need to spend money that was otherwise, not planned to be spent, I should say, and also to spell out for you just what the way forward is in terms of dealing with the budget. So what this report is about is effectively adding to our infrastructure, existing infrastructure, which is a council baler, right, for baling of cardboard and paper and the like. That facility that we've got, and I'm pretty sure there's some pictures in there, that facility has got some sort of lean-to at this point in time, a covering over it, but it's insufficient. Our staff have indicated as much, and the way forward is to basically extend the protection that's provided to that facility. So that's what this is about. I'm sure between Gillian and myself, we're happy to take any questions as to the report. Thank you.
Questions to either Andre or Gillian to do with the report? Councillor McNish, I'm going to you, Councillor Bronwyn.
Just a quick question, Andre. It looks like extending the lean-to and a bit of cement. How do you justify $60,000?
Yeah. Sorry, I have actually got quotes for this. So I've got it in 2 sections, and to get the slab poured for that area is close to 30, including all the earthworks that need to happen first. And then it is the roof structure, because it has to be rated for cyclone and all sorts of stuff.
Just saying, thanks, Gillian. I agree with you there, but it just seems that anything council takes on costs about 10 times as much as if any one of us was to take it on. Yeah, $60,000. I could do a lot in my place for $60,000.
And I apologise, Gillian, before I go to you, Councillor Bronwyn, what area were we talking about with that area, Gillian? Like, there's a ground area.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
it's the area beside the bays.
Sorry, I wasn't fair to you. What is it, 10 metres, 20 metres?
Oh,
and the reason I asked the question, that hopefully it explains to Councillor McNish, because I'm interested too, Councillor, why that is, because it must be a pretty fair area.
It is a big area. It's at least 50 square metres. I can get you the exact dimensions if you like.
We're going to cement 50 square metres?
Yep, so that we can also, when we bale the cardboard, the issues in the past with the baler was that the cardboard was getting wet. And as you know, when it gets wet, it gets heavier. And so we're having difficulty back then with the machines being able to lift the cardboard to actually put it on the trucks to take it away to recycle. So this is a way that we can protect the paper products so that we can actually get a fair price for them.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, of course, Andre. Before I go to you, Councillor.
Yeah, look, just to support the cost proposition that Gillian's put forward there, Councillor McNish, I appreciate that, what we might do on our properties, you might perceive that we can get better value for money, but I can assure you that once you start getting, proper designs done, to take the loads that are being put upon us, that you go and get quotes from outside contractors, etc. Those quotes add up. I've just been through the exercise, at my own place, actually it's my daughter's place, wanting to do a cover for the pool, just a gable roof cover, right? And they've come back with quotes of $79,000, right? I said, no, I'm overcapitalising the place, but that just gives you a sense of perspective. This is not Tenterfield Baths we're talking about here. This is just a backyard pool, right? So I suppose it sounds a lot of money, but at the end of the day, the costs are what the costs are.
Now that area has been explained, and I apologise again if I haven't picked it up in the report somewhere, that's why I'm asking. I can fully understand that. That's a big area. Councillor Bronwyn, question to the report.
Yes, thank you. But I mean, given that area, that's actually smaller than a shed we put down the Rocky. So the cement had to come down to the Rocky, and it was 60 square metres, and the shed, and it all came to $14,000, including the earthworks and the cement coming to the Rocky. So I'd love to get a quote on that area of cement and see, as a person, and see if the cement area quote is different because you're council. I know your shed obviously is the cover has to meet all those ratings. But my questions are, you've already answered about the community.
Order, councillors, please.
Part 2, the savings to fund it from additional revenue possibilities, but savings in other areas of council waste operations. Was that in reference to the possibility of using some of that cardboard as a layer on top rather than dirt? Is that the bit is that the potential saving you're talking about? And can we please, in number 4, can we change baler, get rid of the I? And that'd be good. Thanks.
Yes, I can.
I would have spelled it with an I. Okay.
Yes, I can do that. Thank you for picking that up. And to answer your question, I'm not sure about the Rocky, but it does have to be rated for trucks, so we have to have a thicker slab for the area.
Get to drive on, yeah.
To put trucks on, so it has to be thicker, so that's probably the difference in cost. To answer your other question, sorry. Savings. We'll be making a lot more money if we bale the product and sell it on than we are now through Lismore, is how it'll work.
Yep.
Because we only pay a mixed recycle fee, and if we've baled it ourselves, that will give us a better return. So that there's savings there. We can also do plastics with the baler, and we can also do steel. So we can do a lot more of our own internal recycling with the baler itself. And the last one, we are using, there is a trial that we can use the cardboard as a, it's like a layer.
Yeah.
It's called Posishell.
Yep.
And we can spray it on instead of using soil.
Yep.
And
Shred it, didn't it?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
shred the cardboard first. That won't be baled, obviously, because that'll be utilised. So any excess stuff that we can't bale, that might be damaged, wood damaged, or food damaged, or any to that effect, will be going out to the trial at Bonnabonoo.
Save on purchasing and dirt, or moving dirt as well as
Space. That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Councillor Bromman. Councillor Mike Petrie.
You were just saying a while ago, through you, Mr. Mayor, that bale, you can bale steel with it too, can you?
Yes, but it's only cans, so not
can.
like big steel things.
Oh, yeah, I
yeah.
thought my scrap metal, yeah.
Yeah, no, we still do the scrap metal sales
Oh,
from
yeah.
the pile.
You do cans and that, oh, yeah, fair
Yeah,
enough.
cans.
I just
Okay,
think-
councillors, any other questions to Gillian? Got a question, Councillor Very?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor,
Favourable, you hope.
about the quality of the cement you're using over there. I imagine it'd have to be probably 150 mils, and you'd have to have about 2 or 3 times the amount of Rio in it that than Councillor Petrie's shed down the Rocky. just
That's probably right.
Okay, councillors. The report's there in front of you. I do need to comment, councillors, on this and the previous report, this report, and the next one. With some months ago, and I had a yarn with our CEO yesterday about. I think it is. We are moving forward with our waste issues. All this adds to that argument. It adds that we are more self-reliant on what we do, self-sufficient, I should be saying, and I think we're building a really good case going forward about what we're doing. Yes, it will cost us a bit of money in the end, but I think we'll see savings in the long term. So I do commend the staff that have been involved with these few reports. It's been good stuff. And I know that we'll see some good stuff going forward in that. So it was. Okay, the report's there in front of you, councillors. All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, moving on to page 92, ENV 29/18, Waste Services Review. Moving a second here, please, to deal with this. Councillor Bronwyn, thank you. Second to Councillor Bob Rogan, thank you. And once again, I'll hand over to the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Andrew, what's your name? Andre Kumbla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Andre.
Councillors.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillors, going back to, I think it was April of this year, there was a move to, I suppose, better understand our waste services function within council, and to certainly look at what our potential obligations were going forward. I think I have said to you in the past that it was suggested to me that based on our consumption of the landfill cell that we had out at Bonnabonoo, or we have out at Bonnabonoo, that we possibly had only 12 months left and that landfill cell would be full, and where to next. That certainly triggered a somewhat substantial investigation, not only at my level. I mean, both Julie and myself have been working on better understanding the business, but I engaged a couple of consultants. One was by the name of Bob Bailey, Robert Bailey, who has had some involvement with dealing with council or advising on council's waste issues in the past, back in 2012, when they were in a much worse state than one could have contemplated now. We're in a reasonably good position going forward, but that said, Bob did provide advice in the past just on our existing landfills around the place, and since then there was a number of landfills that were closed and they became transfer stations, etc. So I suppose we've moved on from them, just to pick up the Mayor on his comments about, moving forward with our waste operations. But certainly we needed to understand what were the options going forward, what were going to be the costs. I mean, at the end of the day, I have heard Councillor McNeish and other councillors express sentiments that, we need to be reducing our waste charges, our Section 501s, our Section 496s. Now, at the end of the day, I think just everyone needs to be aware of just what the cost of business is. And that's why we've modelled the cost of business as being what we call business as usual. There is a booklet there that specifically outlines for you the cost of business as usual over the next 10 years. But business as usual, I've defined in here as taking into account what our capital needs are going forward. Our capital needs are not only to provide a new landfill cell, or an extension to the cell that we've currently got at the present time. It's not only that, but it's also our liabilities, the remediation of works as we continue into the future. Some of those remediation works still exists out at Sunnyside Loop Transfer Station, as I've indicated in the report, and there will be an ongoing need for remediation in the future at our Bunnabanoo landfill as we continue to use that facility. Now, what's important, councillors, is that we just are very clear on what we're agreeing or what we're recommending today. When I looked at the review, we looked at options for trying to reduce costs. Now, those options, we started to get some feedback from our consultant on what those, cost option changes might have been. And dare I say, look, we will have in, next month another update on just what those evolving, cost changes might be. But at the end of the day, we have to continue to operate, right? We have to continue to plan for where our waste will go. We've had a good hard look at the Bunnabanoo landfill site. We know, and I've included in the report, that we've got a master plan that was developed back around 2015 through Gutteridge, Haskins and Davies, our consultant. That master plan shows the development of that landfill for the next 50 years. So notwithstanding that maybe 5 to 10 years' time we might well get waste to energy happening, you will still need a landfill to take a certain amount of residue, because not everything can be combusted. So bottom line is that we will still need a landfill. We will still need to have a cell that's a new cell to put what residue and waste we have into that location. There are some issues going forward, right? I have no doubt about that. And that's why this report does have 11 recommendations there. It's basically to enable us to get on with the job of continuing business into the future. Keep in mind that we will certainly look to minimise the costs as we go forward, but I don't believe that just because we don't have all the costs back on the other options that we should be forestalling a decision to get on and do the development that we need to do for the landfill cell, or for you to just appreciate that we need to allow for the CapEx into the future as part of business as usual. So I would commend the report to you as is, the recommendations as are. There's quite a bit of information there, as noted in the booklets, but how I felt it was appropriate to bring it to your attention, the fact that we do have a master plan there, the fact that we do have an 10-year projection of business as usual and what that means, and we do have flagged what we need to do in the near future, right, to make sure that we have a sustainable operation into the future. And might I just close on the one point about sustainability? Business as usual in this booklet does mean that in 3 years' time, there will be a 4-year period because of the CapEx of Bunnabanoo, because we've got to extend the landfill or build a new landfill cell out there. There will be a time when we have to go into deficit to effectively fund those capital works. But if we keep the same fees and charges that we do have indexed, right, we will come out at the back end in 10 years' time with effectively $4 million up our sleeve in reserve to be able to contribute towards what we need to do for the following 12 years, which will have a certain amount of remediation associated with it. It'll have a certain amount of works associated with building yet another cell, right? That's just life. You build these cells, they last 10 years or thereabouts, you use them up and then you've got to build another one. So I believe it's sustainable over the next 10 years as is, and I would commend to you this report and this recommendation as stated.
Thank you, Andre. Councillor, before I get to questions from our councillors, the CE would like a comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was a question at the last meeting regards to council's capacity to borrow for timber bridges, and my answer was that we're looking at it and it's certainly not discounted. And one of the reasons that we couldn't or shouldn't answer it there and then is highlighted on page 95 of the report. With the graph where Mr. Compler's mentioned that we dip in. Well, we're dipping into things that don't exist. So that $3 million or $4 million over that period of time, that's got to be funded from somewhere. So I mentioned last month that we are investigating options, but we can't really put our finger on a loan, although we've got a great loan borrowing ratio, we can't or shouldn't act hastily in relation to the timber bridges before we understand what our cash flow period is going to be for 10 years with the other two big elephants in the room, which is our water filtration plant and waste management. And we're almost at the stage we're going to know this now. This is a really good one because that was a big hole in our intellectual property that was missing. And we already know that a new filtration plant's 9.3 million, and we put in an application of which, if we're successful, we'll get 75% of that. So, and if not, we'll have to pay the whole lot of it. So it's going to be between 25 and 100% of 9.3 million. We know what this is, and by February we'll have a great or a much better idea on what the condition of the other 35 timber bridges are. And therefore, when we get the three lots of that information together, we'll be in a decision to work out what our borrowing capacity is and our repayment capacity is with the three big assets that we're facing renewal in the next 10 years. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for your comments. Councillors, questions to Andre to do with the report? Councillor Verry, then I'll go you, Councillor Bronwyn. Councillor Verry. Question?
Yeah, question to you, Mr. Mayor. Andre, with the report, you've got 11 recommendations there. Have you got any particular one you go with, or are they going to come back to council as a single recommendation? And in the report, I'm not too sure it's this one or the other one because I couldn't mark it. Liston is spelt with an E, not an O, not an E.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Order, please. Andre, yeah, of course.
Thank you, Councillor. Duly slapped down and advised. Look, with the 11 recommendations that I've got here, it's not that we're adopting one or have a preference for one or the other.
All of them.
The reality is that is the suite of recommendations that I'm saying we need to adopt going forward to allow us to not only function, right, business as usual, but to develop, right, the CapEx needs that we've got into the medium term, right? And I'm flagging with you, right, the landfill cell that we've got at the present time. it's got effectively, well, as of July of this year, it had 3 years ahead, right? So we're probably down to 2.5 years, right? So there's probably going to be some expedited design, right, for the cell, the new cell, on stage 1 of the master plan in 2019. And then we will allow ourselves at least 1.5 years to get through the contractual side, the approval side, etc., before we get a contractor on site. So bottom line is that we need to make decisions, but part of, before we make those decisions, was to flag with you the steps, right? The steps involved. And whilst the actual review looked at some options for costs, what I'm saying to you is that, look, those costs, yes, they involve different permutations of business as usual. For argument's sake, it might have said, you know, we can take some of our waste to Queensland instead of, you know, trying to, you know, deal with it at Bunabanu or the likes. Now, at the end of the day, all of those things are going to have cost implications. And what I'm suggesting to you, if we adopt business as usual, which is the first part, right? Oh, sorry, it's item 2 of the recommendation, right? If we adopt that, just bear in mind that as part of business as usual, Gillian and myself will be looking very carefully at where we can reduce our costs, right? So that we're in a better position to manage the business. This business is meant to be cost neutral. It's not meant to be a bleed, right, on the other areas of council, like the general fund.
Good point.
Okay, and as I, if you look at page 95, you see there the combined cash projection, right? The cumulative cash flow, right, or cash reserve, I should say, the cumulative cash reserve at any year, right, is as you've seen there, and it's only in you know, that 4-year period in between, providing we keep the same fees and charges going, appropriately indexed. Like I said earlier, it will come out the back end with a decent reserve. But hey, look, if we want to try and sort of slow things down now, sort of look for short-term opportunities to cut some of our fees and charges, it's just going to change the whole scheme of things and make for indecision, which you will pay for ultimately with the likes of Coffs Harbour, who are, you know, in a position, you probably read about it in the news last night about Coffs, you know, drowning in their waste, right? Because they're not planned ahead, and they've got 12 months left on their waste facility. So I don't want to be in that space. Thank you.
Councillor Bronwyn, Councillor Bronwyn, you've indicated. Question to the report.
Yeah, just to do with the relocation of the asbestos cell. And look, thank you, Honour. It's a very, very comprehensive report. Thank you. And you've detailed the steps we require to go through. So if you look in the thingy, on section 4, page 8, very technical term thingy.
Yep.
It's like, what's the name?
Some people would call it the booklet, but we'll go on.
We'll go to page 8. And you can see where the existing animal cell and asbestos cell are there to this bottom left corner. And then you go to the modelled plans. It's got relocating that asbestos and dead animal disposal areas to the bottom, and the fill stage area will come across that. I'm just wondering how we relocate the asbestos cell.
Councillor, when it comes to relocating cells, Councillor, we've got the master plan that we're going to be trying adhere to. Now, I know that there was and where we're currently putting asbestos at this point in time, it's close to the property boundary, you know, as you come into the facility. And from memory, I don't think that's going to change terribly much. Ultimately, that whole area, I mean, when you look at the master plan, it just shows, you know, one almighty big ultimate hill that's going to be built out there, albeit that you won't be able to see it, and we'll move across those areas. So I would not be envisaging that we'd be wholesale seeking to move the asbestos from where it is at this point in time.
If you look at the plan, the current asbestos cell is over here.
Sorry, what page is that, please?
Oh, it's got SK008 and actually doesn't have a page. So it's halfway through the it's when you get to the coloured things. Maps, diagrams.
That's better.
the diagrams of the master plan, SK 008, and you'll see asbestos and dead animal disposal areas, and that have been relocated because where they currently sit is in here.
Yep.
Is in there. So there's a complete relocation of both, and the dead animal one's further up. So I was just wondering, I mean, that'll be a little bit of an exercise, obviously, with health and safety to do that, and that would have to be a preliminary, that'd be one of the first things they'd have to do.
Well, you'd think so, councillor, yeah. But Andre would be better to, and Gillian would be better to comment there.
Yeah, no, I don't want to take the time.
No, you're fine.
Do we need specialist people to come to it?
We won't be relocating that site at all. In fact, when the plans were developed in 2016, a lot of the legislation has changed since then, including that of asbestos, because asbestos contaminates the ground that it's in. There's a lot more regulation around how we deal with asbestos now, and so we'll probably end up getting those plans revised slightly to keep the asbestos pits where they are. They will eventually all be covered once the Bonnaboo site is completely full.
Yeah.
But until then, we'll be keeping the asbestos together.
Yep.
If that answers your question.
Yep.
No.
Okay. Any other questions to either Gillian or Andre? Councillor Bob, of course.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be very, very quick.
No, you're right, councillor.
For Andre, on those recommendations, item 7, I'm just interested in the adjustment that may be sought after a survey was done on the EPA licence. So does that mean that each cell, if you need more or whatever, it's got to have an individual licence? Or so what's that actually referring to? And thereafter seek adjustment to council's EPA licence. Does that mean we have to apply for another licence?
So, councillor, just before we go to Andre, we're on page 93 and it's up in the red, number 7. That's what Councillor Reagan's referring to.
Thank you.
Councillor, that item 7 there about doing a survey, at the end of the day, the report talks about a certain consumption rate of, might be 20, or our licence might be, say, 3,000 tonne per annum, right, for usage at Bonnaboo. That's the EPA gives us a licence to, how would you say, consume the facility or place that amount of waste per year. Now, we had a survey, an aerial drone survey done back around April, and what we're suggesting is that we get an updated survey, right, which we can then basically just do the simple maths of, the current day survey minus the previous survey is a very, very real current day indication of the usage of the tonnage, right, that's going into that facility. Now, based on what we're currently doing and our projections, we can then go back to EPA and say, right, this is how things are really happening, right? We just need to get our house in order and get our licences in order. That's all I'm suggesting.
Is the licence for a set amount of years?
I don't believe it's for a set amount of years. It's for a facility.
Thank you, councillors. Before we vote on this, to you, Andre, and Gillian, I commend you on the report, and really, really pleased to see you using Bailey Consultants. I'll never shift away from the fact that Bob has experience with this shire, as you've mentioned, and I hold him in the highest regard. And when we're in the world of hurt, we were when I was first on council, and Councillor McNish would have been there. We were in a mess. He was the only one, I reckon, that came with any practical experience and common sense, the flower we spoke about today. So I'm really pleased to see that we're using him. And I remember him. He wouldn't remember me if I bobbed up in his bath. It doesn't matter. But I just need to comment on that. And I wish you well with dealing with him, because he was a really good bloke, and it was good to see that he had some practical experience, because he helped us out big time at the time. So he was. Okay, the report said, councillors, all in favour to note the draft status? Yep. Against? Carried. Righto, we move on to page 98. Councillors, this item, GOV 9718, monthly operational report. Can I move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Very, thank you. Second, Councillor Murray, thank you. I'll hand over to our Chief Executive, Mr. Terry Dodds.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this current monthly operation report is actually quite important. On page 7, page 11, and page 15, I've written about our difficulties that council's having with the policy that Transport for New South Wales has set for fixed in-country roads grant funding. After the mayor and myself attended Alice Springs, we found out why the government the government needs to address the first and last mile. It's quite an altruistic thing that they're doing, and it's because Australia's freight movements have to double in the next 30 years, and the least double handling we do, the more efficient and effective our freight movement is, and therefore the more competitive we are internationally. So theoretically, it's all good. The problem being when the scale is small, the theory doesn't stack up. So I've written there on page 7 that the higher mass limit is flawed policy, and that we've conveyed without success. As late as the day before yesterday, we got a letter from Sharon Bennett from Transport for New South Wales, which I forwarded through to Thomas George and Andre with the simple comment, interesting reading. I think we're being, or local government was being softened up. And the letter basically said that if you haven't got a BCR and you're not HML, this is the reasons that you won't be getting money for the fixing country roads. So they're not listening. I'm hoping that I'm completely wrong, in which case I'll buy you all a beer at the Christmas party.
We'll hold you to that.
Page 11, I've also highlighted that the fixing country roads policy framework is completely flawed. I'm not the only one that thinks that. Everyone that was at Alice Springs said the same thing. And on page 15, and page 16, I've mentioned there that we're having basically emergency correspondence with the Minister for Transport's office, Melinda Pavey, and her advisors, and also Transport for New South Wales, in relation to the fact that our initial grant application for $3.18 million, council never stated it was going to be financially contributing. And there was a very good reason for that we're already financially contributing, and we couldn't leave our $1.4 million in the bank just in case we got funding from the New South Wales government to fix up our bridges. If we were waiting for the New South Wales government for fixing country roads, money for that, we would have been successful with the 9 applications we've already put in. So not acting when our community is under so much stress on the proviso that the state might supply grant funding would have been a folly. Council's done the right thing by hooking in and spending every spare cent we've got. So those 5 dot points have been conveyed to the member for Lismore, the Roads Minister, and one of her advisors, and Transport for New South Wales. And I'm hoping today that with Mr. George visiting us to break bread at 1 o'clock, that it's for good news for the Fixing Country Roads grant application for $3.18 million. A couple of days ago, actually, I think it was a couple of days ago, on Monday, council wrote to every person that attended the community information sessions regarding timber bridges, thanking them for contacting the state and federal members, and also asking them to get in contact with Mr. David Council, because when we went to the Liston meeting, there's a fairly experienced bridge builder up there, John Burton. Seems to be a pretty handy family, that. They're good at building lots of things. And we heard off a lady there, Terry Bonner, that there's some really good quality hardwood up there that we might be able to get our hands on. So council has written to everybody that attended those meetings, saying that we've had these offers. If after those meetings that you think of something that may be of assistance to council, please contact David and we'll work with you. Good quality hardwood is really hard to get hold of, and judging from the Liston meeting, we might have some reasonable quality ironbark. Although I've heard off people that know more about timber than me that it's better on the western side than the eastern side. But that's for the people that build bridges to work all that out. So I just highlighted that risk because I'm really a little bit gun shy about the fixing policy roads framework, because I haven't heard much common sense in any of the conferences that the Mayor and I have attended, or any of the other chief executives that I've spoken to. I understand that Bellingen is having difficulties, Kyogal's having difficulties, Bega's having difficulties, and we're having difficulties with the same policy. It's an altruistic policy, and look, it's a good policy in theory, but all things in theory need to be tempered to what they work in reality. The rest of the report, I'll take by questions by exception. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Questions, Mr. Sayre, to do with the report. Councillor Sawyer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Terry, at the last meeting, I think we decided that moving forward, the organisational chart would include FTE. I note that it's not on there yet. When's the introduction date for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's actually in the workforce development report embedded. And one of the reasons that the chart wasn't changed up until now was that we've had a change in staff establishment by moving creating a northern supervisor's manager and retiring a supervisor from this area that was driving up to the north to look after the north. So now we've got the north person in the north, and we changed a couple of other positions. So I asked the Manager of Human Resources and Workforce Development to hold off so that he didn't have to do us. But now that's done, that was done about a fortnight ago. We can take the words that are on, I think it was page 76, anyway, whatever it is. Hang on a minute. 51. In the Manager of Human Resource and Workforce Development's report, he mentions about the FTEs, establishment, casuals and so on. We'll now propagate that into the chart now that those minor changes have been made. And incidentally, I sent an email out to councillors. We did, and he's been working now for us for 10 days. We've got a Parks and Gardens horticultural supervisor now, Craig, who's Milton, who's settling in. Thank you.
Very good.
Any other questions?
Councillor Bob Rogan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, for the CE. Just a quick question, Terry. Do you think state now understand the bit about they were concerned about the non-contribution from the council and the reasons why? Do you think they get that, or they're taking that into account now?
Look, I don't know, Councillor Rogan. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors in Transport for New South Wales. My gut suspicion is they're driving the bigger picture economy so hard that they're willing to take a few sacrifices for smaller picture economies, but that's only my subjective opinion.
Any questions to Councillor McNish? Yes.
Just a quick one, Terry. I noticed the cattle figures of 5,124 head down on the previous year. That's page 87 of 166. That's a massive drop, and I'm really concerned about propping up a bit of infrastructure which seems to be on the downhill slide all the time. At roughly $10 a head, I know it's a bit more than that for council fees. That's $51,000 we're down just on our fees for the year, and I don't know what the answer is, but I'm very concerned at that figure.
Hopefully, with council, once again, council, that's your opinion, and figures are there, and it's good to note. But same thing. I mean, we all know in the season that we've just faced, and with the figures that we deal with, and we're not the only council to deal with them to do with the online selling, Auctions Plus, and those it was noted some time ago with the figures that we've lost in the last 12 months due to Auctions Plus. But it's an ongoing challenge, and I'm pleased that you've noted it. Any other questions to say? Councillor McNish, was that the only question? Yep, thank you. Councillor Michael Petrie.
Just a matter of interest, Glen Innes Yards, Colin Say and Company over there, they pull their stakes up down there and selling all their cattle over to Inverell.
Okay.
And you'll find the whole thing there. This one here will have big effects on here too.
Yeah, to do with the same day they're on with the buys and that, councillor.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of
I
that.
think you find, Bruce Birch said to me, he's the head of Ray White, he said Tenterfield should jump in and start to get the cattle in through getting the first sale off at starting at 8 o'clock in the morning with a shorter curfew, which will help get the cattle here for the sale.
Yeah, well, then that's a really good point, because it's the other way around at the moment with GI going before us.
Yeah. See,
That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, when you got a few cattle here, so many cattle here, they're in at 3 o'clock on Sunday evening, not getting weighed till 3 o'clock on Monday evening.
Yeah.
Which is a big difference. I don't know. It's not helping encourage the people to bring their cattle here.
Yep, the CE's just got some comment there.
Through Mr. Mayor, this is a pretty complex subject, and I think it would be really good, since there's so many councillors on Tenterfield Council that know so much about the cattle industry, for us to bring it to a workshop and actually do some planning. I've been here 14 months, and I don't think we've had a workshop on or any brainstorming session on the sale yards. We've been doing business as usual.
Okay.
Perhaps a workshop to dig down and look at markets and actually dig a bit deeper and talk about it would be a good time, particularly what's happening with Glen Innes.
To be supportive of the CE, I think that's a great idea, but that's a really good, what you raised, Councillor Petrie, to do with that. Well, we need to be, obviously, in relationship we have with our 3 agents, we need to be working with them along those lines too, to see what their thoughts are to do with that. Yep. Yep.
I think they're really going to feel
Yeah, 60 k's away. Yep.
It's not going to be real easy.
Yep.
We might survive if we update our
Yep.
style of things.
Yep. No, noted. Councillor Bronwyn, then I'll go to you, Councillor Berry.
How quickly could that be done? Could we change our selling time?
I think you'd have to work. Councillor Petrie would be more to do with his experience as a cattle buyer. It'd definitely have to do with the agents and that problem, I would think. Yeah, if they're happy to do that or they're suggesting, easy.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
all we
that's-
require. Just
yep.
concurrence amongst the agents.
Because now with GI going first, the buyers go there first, then they come to here. We're 11:30.
Yeah, that's right.
That's correct, Mike, isn't it? Yep. So it'd just be a swap around. But if they're going to have agents pulling out of there, which is obviously not good for them, but that's their problem, Glen Innes, and going to Inverell to support that facility there, well, that's a concern that they're going to deal with.
No,
Yeah.
my thought was, if that's the case, we should do it sooner rather than
Yeah,
later
yeah.
and jump
Yep.
in on it
Yep.
and go from the start.
Or maybe we work towards our first get together in New Year with the workshop.
Well, does it even need that? All I'm saying is just contact the agents.
See what they think.
First sales, I think 7th of January.
Yep.
It could be in place by then, perhaps. So, yeah.
Yep, of course.
Also,
Yeah.
Through Mr. Mayor, why don't we leave it fluid? I'm confident that the Chief Corporate Officer's got the flavour of where we're heading, and we'll go up from there, because it might be simpler than what we think. It might be more complex than what we think, but we also must engage with the 3 agents as well.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I take Councillor Bronwyn Petrie's comments on boards sooner rather than later, but we'll leave it a bit fluid rather than setting something we want it to go in reverse if it doesn't work out.
You had a question, Councillor, or comment? Councillor Peters, yes? Sorry, Councillor Berry, I'll go to you next.
I think the first thing we need to do to get the cattle into our sale yard from the north is fix the bridges. Otherwise, they're going the other direction.
Hear, hear.
Which is obvious.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Good. Councillor Berry, you had a question. I'm sorry, I'll go back to you, Councillor Bronwyn. No, she's not going.
She's not going.
I'll go back to her.
She's stopping there.
No, all good.
Okay, just a couple of comments. I agree with Tom. I was just going to say that myself. But if you're going to have a workshop, why don't you include the whole sale yards committee?
Yeah, of course we will.
And with the Bunabanu Bridge, certainly all the cattle are going to go north at the moment because the bridges can't take them. But isn't that road be double rated already, or should be there's nothing wrong with from here to Liston except for the bridge.
You're getting these.
That could be B double rated.
Well, Mr Mayor, no, the road is not B double rated, and I think before we'd even contemplate that, we'd have to have a serious look at just the road widths that we've got. You know, there's sections of road there that still are probably, you know, there's a bit of a question mark. I know certainly north of Liston, that's, you know, there's probably not there's probably not a hope of it becoming B double rated anytime soon, just the sheer number of roadworks. But look, it might well be that, you know, after a review, there could well be scope to connect with, you know, the road through Amisfield out north. So,
yeah.
Well, that used to be the route, so I can't see why it couldn't be again. And if we did that, it'd certainly put our bridge further up the chain, wouldn't it?
You would hope so,
To
councillor.
get some money, you'd think so. But with the timber up there, grey gum is probably better than iron bark, and there's a lot of grey gum in that country. It's more durable. It's got a whole heap of things going for it over iron bark, I should say. But at any rate, I think that's right, 74,000 I noticed in the budget here that was spent on the Mount Lindsay. Is that part of it, that work that's ongoing at the moment near 3200 kilometres?
Are you referring to the reseal, councillor?
Yeah, piece that was just done up.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, you just finished, yeah.
sorry, what page are we on? What budget item are we referring to?
Councillor's, he's on his iPad and you're on the hard copy. So it's obviously to do with your report. He's quoted a figure, councillor, haven't you? Like money being spent on the Mount Lindsay. Can you go to the figure? That might help Andre find it. Okay. Well, yeah, you can. I'll leave you, councillor Fine. I'll go to you, councillor Bronwyn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Question to do with the report,
Yes,
councillor?
to the Chief Executive, thank you.
Yep.
I note on our staffing list that under the fleet coordinator.
Councillor, what page are you staffing list on?
Page 2. Oh, gosh, page 4.
Yep.
Under the diagram, over on the fleet coordinator, we're missing 3 mechanics. We've only got 3. So we're missing, we've got a vacant service advisor mechanic, a vacant plant mechanic and a vacant trainee. So I'm just wondering how things are going there in fleet.
Yep.
There's 3 parks and gardens vacant, and also we've got a vacant manager assets and program planning, and it says council has contacted a specialist recruitment agency to assist. That is on page 122. I'm wondering what cost is involved in getting a specialist recruitment agency to assist. And I've got a couple other questions, but if you can just do that.
We've now got a service advisor mechanic, SAM. Is his name Paul Andre? Brad's offside. What's his name? Oh, he's been working for us for about a month.
Yeah, no, I met him last night.
Paul Gower. Yeah, we've got a senior advisor mechanic. We've now, and this chart needs updating. We've got someone that comes in.
Order, councillors, please.
Part-time each afternoon in lieu of a trainee. Well, actually, it's a pre-trainee, really. Comes in for 3 or 4 hours a day, or 3 hours a day, after lunch every day, to help with the more menial tasks in the workshop. We're putting on and changing casuals to full-time in parks and gardens. We've had a couple of changes there, so that's getting bumped up. So the 2 casuals there are in conversation with the manager of workplace, HR and workforce development. I only had that conversation on Monday. We've had a long-term staff member there take a years-long service leave, so that's going to change that whole paradigm there. The manager of asset and project planning, I think they start on the 17th of January, Andre, or is it the 17th of February? Anyway, we're just about across the line with the manager of asset and project planning. Mark II, we did offer it to our first from the interview and the selection criteria, but that person's decided to stay where they are. So we've gone back to the merit selection, and we've made another offer which has been accepted. I think Barry said they start on either the 17th of January or the 17th of February, so that one's filled. The corporate management accountant, which is another a vacant position, that's currently being done contractually, and I mentioned that before, that we've got, actually Kylie could speak to this about Igor and Edna, about one being very good at statutory accounting and one being very good at management accounting, so they do a little bit each. That's about it. So with those replacement positions, I think as of Monday we're only going to be one position down, so we're going all right.
Thank you, Terry. Councillor, you had another question to do with the report.
The other things, page 11, the health, and the last sentence in that first box is the issue wasn't resolved about the patient transfer hospital options, but was passed to the cross-border commissioner to further address. I was wondering, it's not an issue with the hospital, it's not an issue with this. Clearly, it's an issue with the ambulance.
Correct.
Overriding both hospital and doctor
Correct.
direction. So can council seek in writing to the ambulance service and the minister who administers them why they are doing this and why they are refusing to obey a doctor direction to send a patient to the best doctor or specialist they deem suitable, particularly with a patient's history, because it is beyond a joke, to the point of where it's nearly a stage of organising a public meeting and having them answer the public and I'd be happy for council to call that public meeting.
Totally agree.
Because it is just, it is pathetic.
With our state member being here at lunchtime today, you raise it with him.
Yeah, we'll do the
I've
other
had
thing.
it with him several times and he's aware.
Right, well, it's not getting anywhere. So the other thing would be, with regard to what Terry spoke to earlier about our issue with Transport New South Wales and our grants being unsuccessful for various almost petty reasonings, given the geography.
Careful.
Well, on one hand, we're getting information from Transport New South Wales to say it's not B double ready and high mass loading.
Yep.
However, when I was in Parliament House and I spoke to the Minister's Office people, they said, no, that is not correct. It was the fact that it's got to show fixing country roads is not fixing B double roads. It is actually got to show a transport improvement or non-loss. And I explained about our bridges, and they said, oh, no, well, that didn't come across in the applications. I said, well, we are being told it wasn't B double ready. Exactly. And they said that is not the criteria. So can we please seek a written response from Transport New South Wales in regard to the refusal on the basis of high mass loads and not the criteria according to the Minister's advisors, please? And my final thing was...
I'll answer that one. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we got a response from Sharon Bennett yesterday, and in writing doesn't line up with what the Minister Advisor has informed us.
Black and white.
Black and white about high mass loads.
High mass loads, benefit cost ratios, the whole bit.
Right. The other thing is council's image, page 19, to do with the website. Another part of the document did say that the biggest influencer on visitation here is actually online now, and there was a comment about the visitor centre needing upgrading in light of that. It's got here initial investigations, refreshing of council websites, both corporate and tourism, have substantially commenced. Projected completion date is the end of March 2009. Who is doing the refreshing?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll ask Nolene to answer that. I understand Caitlin, yourself, Nolene, and there was one other person, I think it was Erica.
Yes, so just at the moment, we've got a work group set up. So there's Sarah, Caitlin and Rebecca Kelly are doing it, and I think they're almost to the stage of going out and asking for expressions of interest for people to start to do the refreshing. Yes.
Yep. Good. Okay, councillors, any more questions to our CE to do with the monthly operational plan? Sorry.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll print it off and hand it out at lunchtime.
To all councillors. Okay. Councillor Verry. Yeah, go back to your answer. You say patiently waited for, councillor.
Yes. Yeah, so.
And thank you, Andre.
Yeah, so councillor Berry, on page 138, you're referring to the revised QBR budget of 274K there? Yeah. Okay, where's that being spent? Yeah. Yep, okay. So there's a section of road that had problems with the seal and the shoulders, right? So
that's exactly
that's the location that we're talking about fixing properly once and for all.
Come through there yesterday, Andre, and it looked a real good job. They'd just done it. Yeah. I hope it still looks all right this morning, councillor. Yeah. Nah. Good. Okay. Councillors, the officer's recommendations there. All in favour to receive and note. In favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, we move on to page 99, your hard copy. It's item GOV 9518, council recess period, 2/18/19, a delegation for chief executive leave period. I would like to move an amendment, and I'm happy to do this because with the officer's recommendation, that's from 1 to 5. We do have apologise, we do have a 6 and 7. So no one else has got a copy of that? No. Okay. So I'll work, it's on the screen and Nolene will put that, you're going to cross it out?
No, well, I'm going to uncross it.
Oh, okay. So that's it. So I'll read it to you. The council approved the temporary appointment of Manager Corporate Services, Governance and Records, Erica Bursford, to the position of Acting Chief Executive for a period Wednesday the 2nd, January 2019 to Monday the 7th, January 2019. And number 7, the subject to section 377 of the Local Government Act 1993, the delegations of council to the Chief Executive be conferred on the Acting Chief Executive, Erica Bursford, for the period 2nd of January 2019 to Monday, 7th of January 2019. So amendment, can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Broderick-Petrie, thank you. All in favour for those 6 and 7? Yep. Do I just do this? All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Take question, councillor.
Just with regards to councillor Murray's rescission motion, if we're in recess and if it needs to be dealt with because it's a DA prior to then, does that impact if there was an extraordinary meeting or something?
I'll hand over to CE or some wonderful advice here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've spoken with the Chief Corporate Officer and spoken to Councillor Murray as in the process for council to receive the rescission motion, and I'll be in discussions with the Mayor with the proviso that it would be ideal to hold a extraordinary council meeting early in the new year, possibly the 10th, due to the fact that we're on the clock with the development application, and to be fair to all applicants, we try and get the developments approved within 40 days. So I've yet to have that conversation because we've been in a council meeting. But,
that's right.
And I'd encourage all the councillors during the recess at lunch to see me and let me know when they'd be available, because I'd like to get all councillors to be in attendance, because I don't think it'd be fair for it to be the other way. I don't think it'd be fair to any councillor if they couldn't view their opinion with that being such a sensitive matter.
Thank you, Mr. CE. Councillors, any questions? And remember, we've done amendment, that's accepting 6 and 7. Any questions to Chief Executive to do with the 1 to 5? No? Okay. Officer's recommendations there, all in favour? Right. I'll start again. No, I'm not. I got to move. I moved an amendment for 6 and 7. I got a seconder for that, and we voted on that. Now I need someone to move and second to deal with this one here. Councillor Verry, I thank you. Seconded Councillor Bob Reagan, and I thank you. So no questions to the CE to do with this. Okay. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. I apologise. Okay. Move on to page 102. It's item GOV 96/18, administration of the 220 council election. Can I move in a second to deal with this one, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Seconded Councillor Murray, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to our CE.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd be happy to take questions by exception on this. It's reasonably straightforward. It's my a fairly firm view that individual local governments shouldn't do their own elections. It's a view I've had for decades, and the reason this has come to council now was that we've only got this month or February to have it before council, because the Electoral Commission, their operations require that councils notify them before the 11th of March, and since we don't normally have a council meeting in January, that only leaves February. So it was either going to be this month or February's meeting that it had to go to, and that's about it. Thank you.
Questions to our CE to do with this? Councillor McNish, yes?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is a fairly costly exercise, and bearing in mind that every councillor and prospective councillor has to go to Glen Innes to put their papers in, nomination forms.
Do we? I've never been to Glen Innes to do that.
I've been.
Were you standing for the council out there?
Anyway,
sorry, Joe.
Yeah. Well, some of us went to Glen Innes to put our
Right,
paper.
okay.
But, for years, Kevin Condrick ran the election here and ran it quite well at a fairly small cost. So in town, we actually have an experienced guy who is capable of doing it.
Is he still? I'm sorry to cut you short.
He's still in town. He's still alive.
I know that. But is he still interested in doing such a thing?
I have no idea. But if he's not there, someone else may well be. But I thought I'd throw that up because there was some dissatisfaction with the way the Electoral Commission did. I can't remember the exact details, but there were mumblings and talk about the last one, the failings of the Electoral Commission. I sort of put it up for comment because there was a fair saving there if we decide to do it ourselves. I can see Terry's point of view. Yep. It's out of sight, out of mind, and the responsibilities on somebody else. So I thought I'd just put that up for comment, Mr. Mayor.
Fair comment.
Yep.
Yep. Did you want to comment on that? Yeah.
Through Mr. Mayor, it's a bit like an automobile. Everything's going great while it's fine, but as soon as something happens, the amount of money that you'd save by doing it locally could skyrocket if there's complaints or referrals to the Ombudsman or the Electoral Commission, who wouldn't have a bar in it with the OLG. I've seen it done well by local councils when there was absolutely no hiccups, and I've seen it go absolutely pear-shaped as well. It all depends on how smooth it's run at the time, but if anything were to cause anything to be redone again, you could triple your cost. So I don't think it's worth my personal opinion, or my professional opinion is I don't think it's worth the risk. You might save 10 or 15K, but one hiccup and you've tripled that in extra cost.
I do support what you've said, Councillor, because in them good old days, that's just how it was done, wasn't it? It didn't seem to be a problem, but anyway. Okay, any other questions, comment to the CE to do with this report? The report said Councillor's Office's recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, move on to 105. It's the first to do with our finance. And it's item GOV 97/18, finance and accounts, period ended the 30th November 2018. Can I have a move in a second to do with this, please? Councillor Soy, thank you again. Seconded by Councillor Michael Petrie, and I thank you. And welcome, Paul, as always. And I welcome our finance manager, Mr. Paul Della, and to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to all the councillors. Standard finance report for the month. To receive and note the report, general cash position as at the 30th of November was $2,298,238.36, with our trust account $321,533.93, and our investments totalling $13,619,292.35. You'll note that I've added a new section to this report to deal with the concealed water leakage concession policy. It was presented at last month's council meeting, and some of the discussion around that was around reporting on a monthly basis of any concessions that were approved. So this is where that will take place. There weren't any approved in the period for this report. In addition, I've just added in there was a minor discrepancy in the policy that was adopted, just an administrative issue where in one place it said it was the previous three equivalent periods that would be used to calculate it, but it's the previous 2 equivalent periods as per the calculation that was shown there. So the recommendation just tidies it up as well. So that's that report.
Questions to Paul to deal with the report, councillors? Councillor Bronwyn-Petrie, yes?
Oh, sorry, I just wanted the Sale Yards truck wash thingy. Who's the new consultant?
Through you, Mr Mayor, Maloney and Sons are the consulting engineers.
Any other questions to Paul? No? All happy to receive and note the report, councillors? Against? Carried. Councillors, I'm very, very sorry to bugger around. It's been all over day, so we need to stop. We've got our state member here, who's Terry, and I'm going to need to go and have a quick meeting with him. With approval of the council, we'll finish on that, have lunch, come back and complete our meeting. So we need a, sorry? Yeah, because when we meet, he'll come back and talk with all of us, but when we have lunch. So it's more relaxed. And so could someone move a motion to suspend standing orders? Councillor Tom Peters, second by Councillor Very. So we'll break for lunch. Paul, I'm sorry to bug you around. We can't be late for our state member. Oh, give 3/4 of an hour, use your break. About quarter to 1, quarter to 2 we'll be back. Maybe even give ourselves an hour, quarter to 2.